Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the InsTech London podcast. This is Matthew Grant, host and partner at InsTech London. Now, if you're one of the many people listening to this whilst you're exercising, then you'll be in good company with today's guest. Scott Quiana is Head of Product Marketing and Partnerships at Quantemplate, where he's been for 5 years. But Scott himself once cycled across the US and competes in Ironman triathlons in his spare time. Prior to Quantemplate, Scott spent 19 years at catastrophe modeler RMS after 8 years at Kemper Insurance. Quantemplate itself was founded in 2011, one of the early insurtech stories in the UK, although now based in the US. Then went quiet for a bit, but as we're going to hear shortly, the company has been very busy building its client base and its technology in the last few years. Scott, great you could join us.
Well, thanks for having me.
You and I have known each other for quite a few years, probably about 25 years. You've yourself got a background originally in underwriting and then worked in catastrophe modeling and are now helping Quantemplate expand their business globally.
That is correct.
So Quantemplate was very well known about 4 years ago in the sort of the early stage of insurtech, and then things went really quiet. So can you reveal what's been going on in the last few years when you sort of seem to be operating under the radar?
No, Matthew, that's a great question. I think early days when Quantemplate first started, what we had was a really powerful technology, but we didn't know how it fit into the insurance industry. When I came on board, what we tried to do is understand where the problems, where our technology fit into the problems.
On that point about problems and solutions, can you describe what it is that Quantemplate is doing today?
We have 4 or 5 main use cases, and the 4 or 5 use cases are program management delegated authority, MGA business, commercial property, and specialty casualty rate. The main problem each one of them has is the fractured services they need to use to actually cleanse and process data to actually make sense out of it and inform decisions. And so that's what we're helping each one of those use cases do.
So it's still this problem that you and I have been talking about for 15 years now, where you'd expect there would be some formats in place for companies exchanging data between policyholders and insurers and brokers and reinsurers. That happens in some places, but other places it's still very erratic and still a lot of requirement to clean the data up before people can even start to analyze it.
A lot of companies have spent time trying to sort of unify a data model internally to go feed like financial systems or regulatory reporting. But what it doesn't help with is when companies are ingesting data, the data changes, the formats change. And so what they do is they put manual processes on those. And you can't scale manual processes. A lot of companies have tried to go out to outsourcing, things of that nature. But if you really want to improve a business, outsourcing and things of that nature can only maybe get to a 2x efficiency.
Can you just talk a little bit about how you solve that? Because some of these issues are quite complicated. Everybody seems to have their own interpretation of what's the right format to exchange the data or what's the right data to provide between the different parties.
Yeah, so if you take commercial property, right? Commercial property is, the market is sent through statement of values. Commercial property, the mid to large size is all on Excel spreadsheets or text files. They all come in disparate formats, so on and so forth. And the data is not coherent. Most of the time is spent with people taking that data and manually moving headers and manually cleansing data. But there's technology available that allows people to enable through smart automation the ability to, one, detect where the data starts and ends. And so if I know where the data starts and ends across spreadsheets, I'll know where the headers are. Then there's sort of AI and machine learning or natural language processing, which allows you to map headers. So I can either map it to a standard model or an internal model. And then once you've done that, it's using the same technologies differently to go cleanse data. And so what happens today is that all of that learning, all of that manual work is done in someone's head and on someone's spreadsheet, and you can't let the process learn. And so we're trying to use technology to enable companies to learn through that process.
And in terms of your clients, so you mentioned commercial insurance. underwriters, things with MGA
Yeah.
in there. Are the brokers also doing this? Because in an ideal world, the brokers would take responsibility for the data and then distribute it to all of the carriers. But I mean, there are reasons why that doesn't happen. But are you managing to find any brokers that are sort of helping solve this problem directly?
There is interest in the brokerage community, but I just think the road to actually get there is longer because the companies that influence it are larger and they have a much larger processes in place. And so it's easier right now to actually focus on company to company. And then over time, my guess is the brokers will actually come on board to help through the distribution process.
So Scott, that all makes a lot of sense, but those techniques are quite widely known now, and there are a number of people who claim they can do this. So what distinguishes Quantemplate from somebody else in terms of being able to offer this to your clients or other people that are interested in working with you?
So I think there's a couple of ways to think about that, Matthew. One is AI, machine learning, and natural language processing can't be broadly applied to all problems. Like you have to train a model to solve a specific problem. And if you use commercial property as an example, you have to have a very in-depth knowledge of commercial property and construction occupancy descriptions to build a model that actually solves for it. And so we have that capability and understanding internally. The other is internally for companies, it takes a lot of money to hire data scientists to actually solve each one of these problems individually. And so while the larger companies may be able to solve for it, the mid-sized and smaller companies are going to be challenged. And so we're trying to actually package these problems up into a technology that can be used and consumed through the broader industry, as opposed to people that having to solve these individually.
Okay, so once the more clients you've got, essentially, the more sophisticated the analytics get and the faster it can do the analysis. And then you mentioned commercial, talk about MGAs. What other lines of business are you doing this for?
We're agnostic to class and line of business. So as for program business, it doesn't matter whether it's fleet auto or brownstones or trucking. So for program business, we can see all classes and lines of business through that. And where the machine learning would happen in program business is different than where it would happen in commercial property because the descriptive fields are in different areas. The descriptive fields in program business is likely on the claim settlement side, right? And so you're helping customers be able to say, hey, head trauma X, Y, and Z is able to be mapped to whatever severity class within it, so that people can actually get a better understanding of claims. So the application of AI machine learning across the classes is different, and the problem statement is different.
Okay, and now in the US, your data generally is slightly better behaved than in the UK, particularly in the London specialty market. In the US, people tend to follow the accord forms, less so in the UK. So are you able to deal with this is like more random nature of the data, or you sort of tend to fix around the standards that are out there?
So I think the accord forms are used more on the automated data processes for the smaller insurance companies. And so we're seeing in especially commercial space the same type of data that's brought to the London market, right? At least for the classic carriers that we're focused on. And so, whether you are a commercial condo writer, that's a lot easier problem to solve than the energy business, right? The energy business around Texaco and how you take those classes of business and try and solve for standardizing the construction occupancy classes. Much harder. But it's the same class of business that's coming into the London market.
So talking about London, what's your view on Lloyds, the future of Lloyds and Blueprint One? Quite a lot of the focus of that is around data, standardized services out of Lloyds. They've got the risk exchange and the complex risk exchange, all of which must be pretty key in terms of what you're providing and helping facilitate all of that.
My understanding of the blueprint is it's around placement, which is the risk exchange, the delegated authority, and the claims piece, right? So delegated authority and claims, trying to make claims payment more efficiency, trying to standardize claims, trying to make the process more efficient. I think we're 100% set up and aligned with what that is trying to accomplish. From the claim side, receiving data from however many third-party, for how many TPAs there are in the market is just an incredible feat for any one company. because of just the different sources and different formats that it comes in. And those are the things we're really good at, right? Whether it's when you think about delegated authority and you think about bordereau, it's not just the premium bordereau, but it's the risk bordereau and the claims bordereau. And so how do you actually help bring those things together? The interesting thing about it is that each one of those needs to go feed a service, whether it's claims, actuarial, finance, or stuff like that. And so we can help standardize the services that it feeds off of the same data set. That's what we're really good at.
So Scott, can you talk a bit about the way Quantemplate fits into the workflow? Are you a standalone application, or are you now integrating into other tools that people are using?
Yeah, this is a great question. So I think when I first got here, we described ourselves as agnostic to workflow, right? Which is, I don't think that's really the right thing that we're trying to do. So I think the biggest thing is that what we're trying not to do is impact the existing systems that you have in place. So workflow has to change, right? If people are manually doing things on spreadsheets, we're trying to get that manual process into a technology that is self-service from the user, and able to automate and audit that process. So what we mean by agnostic is it doesn't matter where your data starts from or where it's going to. We can help automate the process to get it there. And if you don't have a place to store it, we can store it. And if you don't have the ability to analyze it, we can analyze it. So as an example, if a bordereau comes in, right, and you need to cleanse it and send it to finance and also send it to a data warehouse, we can do both at the same time. Okay. So it just takes that manual process away into a commercial application where the company can, one, retain the IP, and two, be able to audit and govern the process. And it's repeatable. So if you bring on a new program or a new statement of value, it learns, and you can do the things orders of magnitude faster than you can today.
Got it. So you've got the APIs in there that allow people to hook this into existing systems. And they don't have to come out of one system and go into a separate Quantemplate tool to do this.
Yeah, so we have the APIs right now for going out, and we're creating the ones for the APIs coming in.
And then what about competitors? We talked a little bit about this earlier, but who do you find is the main competitors out there? Are there other people doing this, or is it more of an internal solution, or is it just the usual lack of urgency and inertia that you're pushing back against?
Largely our competitors have been internal to a customer, mostly either the IT organization or the existing people that are doing the processes today. Change is hard within an insurance company, we're finding, right? And so you really need the people that want to change or change the business in terms of making it more efficient. And being able to embrace new technology is one of the key things that we're finding as the challenge. I think the main reasons for that are, if your performance is not based off of the success of onboarding new technology, it's a risk to somebody. And so why does someone want to take that risk if there's no reward at the end? And so it is a unique individual or it's a unique situation of a company that actually wants to take on that risk if they're not positioned for it. Those that have taken us on board are really positioned from a company perspective to help the person be successful and not penalize them if they're not.
Well, how have things changed in the last 4 months? Because you're talking about disruption, the fact people have been forced to work from home, to some extent that must be forcing more of a focus on automation. Have you seen a noticeable increase in inquiry what you're doing?
Oh yeah. So I'll give you a couple of examples. There's a chief risk officer that I know that we had a discussion last week, and basically what he has been tasked with is the current reserving process and the current reporting process. The company and organization wants to increase the frequency of what they're doing it by 4x, right? So if it's being done annually, it needs to be done quarterly, right? If it's being done monthly, it needs to be done weekly. And that's not something you can just turn the dial on and change, right? You need additional resources. COVID has put a pretty big black eye on outsourced services, right? So you saw what ended up happening in some of these countries where when COVID happened, the country shut down, and then the resources that are spent cleansing the data actually had to go back home, but then there wasn't enough service to actually enable them to do their work. And so it's really put a big, bright, shining light on the need for understanding what the impacts are to that type of service and or the need to actually automate. And many of these companies are looking for automated services to actually help the process and reduce the risk. That's one of them. The other one is in commercial property specifically, there's a pretty big exposure apparently to business interruption, right? And that's not, and contingent business interruption. And that's not a lot of things that people are able to capture during the process today. And so how do you change the processes easily enough to actually be able to enable companies to understand the underlying exposure? Those are two big ones.
Yeah, no, it's interesting looking at both those perspectives. Still, at least I guess you got nobody photocopying iPads just now, which is, really in the past. So Scott, we talked about clients quite a lot on the way. Where if people are interested in finding out about who you're working with or case studies, where's the best place to look for those?
Customer logos are on our website, and case studies, use cases are on our website as well. I think those are the two best places to find them.
And then as you look out into the market, you've been around for quite a number of years. What are you most interested in, or maybe even excited about that's happening ahead of us now in the next 12 months?
Wow, that's a big question. Let me think about that a second, Matthew. I think there's this big crossroad in one market is commercial property. Because of what's happened with COVID, because of the past claims, we're in a pretty significant hard market, right? And so a couple of things are happening in that space. One is the existing renewals, which is the bread and butter to insurance companies, are under attack, right? And so brokers and the distribution market is actually giving the companies many more scenarios to run to try and figure out how to bring down the price. And so it is stressing the existing resources. And then in addition, you have a lot more volume of new business that companies haven't seen before that are being shopped. And so there's this great opportunity to use technology to help companies screen and prioritize submissions and be able to organically grow. That's like one of the big ones that excites me in the marketplace today.
Good. And then specifically from Quantemplate, anything you've got coming up we should be looking out for?
We'll be announcing an AI machine learning partnership with a company called Forestry Machine Language. And so we ended up engaging with them, and they're going to solve a number of use cases with us to help embed into the product. And then once we solve those problems, we're going to bring them into the product and make them for broader distribution. So it's taking our existing applications and raising the bar significantly.
Excellent. Well, so finally, and this was meant to be my first question, but you told me I had to ask you at the end. I think with the, you'd already answered this and you could just say, I've already told you, but I want to ask you now because it's on your website where it says you can turn all your insurance data sources into insights you can trust with Quantemplate's data integration, automation and analytics platform. And my question for you was, and is still, what does that mean in practice?
Turn all your insurance data sources, so the disparate data sources that you have, and that you're trying to bring together, that's your different data sources. The data integration is how do you take the manual processes and automate it? And then how do you bring it into a single place where you can get insights into it? That's what that means. I think in practice, Matthew, we're focusing on smaller use cases, and eventually we'll grow into the larger part of the organization.
Finally, any plans to come back over to the UK? You wait until things are clearing up with some more certainty?
For right now, there's no plans to come back to the UK in the near future. Organizationally, we are trying to limit or not allow the engagement with customers or with employees sort of firsthand. And so we're waiting for things to clear up with COVID before we start doing that. And we're checking back in, every other month organizationally.
Strange times we are all in, but of course you've got a team over here in the UK as well. Well, Scott, that was great. Thank you very much for that. We'll look forward to catching up with you face to face, probably now not until 2021, whatever that brings. But it's been great to catch up and learn a little bit about what's been going on at Quantemplate whilst you've been operating under the radar. Sounds like there's been a lot happening, so congratulations.
Matthew, thank you very much for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
We're delighted to have Quantemplate as one of our corporate members at InsTech London. And for this and all our member podcasts, you can find a summary of our conversation on the podcast section of the website if you want to review our podcasts again or share them with somebody else. You can also find out information about becoming a corporate member, past and future events, both face-to-face and our live digital events, and a link to our newsletter, all at our website, www.instech.london. Now, if you enjoyed this or any of our other podcasts, we'd really welcome your reviews on your usual podcast channel. If, for example, you're listening on the iPhone, scroll down to the end of the InsTech London podcast episodes and you can write your review and score us there. That's it for today.